All right, welcome back, Heather. Just wanted to do more of a one-on-one chat with you. We did the town hall recently, and had another entrant into the race here in District 11, and so maybe it's getting a little more crowded, which I think is actually a good thing. I can't remember the gentleman's name. It escapes me, but as more candidates end up entering the race, some people think, well, I'd already been working with this candidate, or I like this candidate, and the other opinions are, well, actually it brings more people into the race and actually generates more interest. So is it just the three of you so far in the race against Loudermilk?
So far, yes. By the way, thank you for having me again. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed it last time. And Antonio is is the third candidate. There is some talk about a possible fourth, but nothing so far, no filings or anything like that. So I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not. There's just been some chatter. But right now it is myself, Antonio, and Bo. We have all officially filed. So yes, I think I'm on the same path as you, or I tend to lean on the same path as you. I think it's a good thing because it does generate interest. And then I kind of look at it as we're all on the same team. It's kind of a healthy competition, but it gives us some practice, all of us, for whoever might be the winner of this primary, to face Barry Loudermilk, because that's going to be, it's going to be a healthy competition. He's going to be a formidable opponent come the general election. And so this gives us good practice for each other to take him on. I mean, he's been in office since 2015, at least in U.S. Congress. He was with the Georgia House prior to that. So this gives us, good time to practice and work together and get to know the district and what the needs are and move forward.
Yeah, for sure. And the stuff that I'm seeing coming from Barry, I don't know that I've seen him quite this reactive in the years that I've been in his district. We're seeing emails, campaign emails, that don't look too different from what Trump's campaign emails look like. Blatant lies. I mean, we're going to get into voting rights, but he is on the same page with Georgia Republicans, just blatant lies about the differences between Georgia and Colorado when it comes to voting. Completely ignoring the fact that in Colorado you have automatic vote by mail. I mean, Georgia Republicans are completely ignoring that.
I'm so glad you said that. I am on his mailing list, and I have been comparing them. I said the same thing the other day. I'm like, he is right in line. Like, he's just towing the line with Trump on a lot of things. Even I get Trump's email still, and the Georgia Republicans, and you see the same. Sometimes it's like the exact same language, or a word or two might be switched around, or they're paraphrasing. It's literally the same things, and sometimes it's the same scary tactics that they're using to get those donations. So it's really kind of awful that he's doing that, and he's focusing so much on that, using that language and that chatter, and I think he's trying to do that to highlight the fact that, or maybe to cover up the fact that he's not doing anything in office. He's barely voted in 2020 and in 2021, and when he has voted, he's voted no. I think he's. And then he went on Newsmax the other day. I don't know. He posted that video on his Twitter, and it's all blatant lies. And he is comparing Georgia to Colorado. And Colorado, just like you said, they can you can automatically vote by mail. And when here in Georgia now, you have to apply to vote by mail. You can't just, you can't just, they don't send it out to anyone. And they also have state-run voting centers where anyone can go. You don't have to go to just your county precinct. So Colorado has a much easier voting process. They've been doing it the right way, a very successful way, an easy way for a very long time. And Georgia just I know we're going to talk about that later. We just destroyed everything in one bill. So, yeah, it's not good.
Well, we might as well go ahead and go into voting rights while we're here. And I just noticed yesterday I happened to pull my University of Colorado T-shirt, and I'm wearing it today.
I
didn't do it on purpose, but, hooray, Colorado. But we might as well just go ahead while we're on the topic here. And actually it's not just Colorado, Western states, if you are a registered voter, I think it's Oregon does it, and a couple of others out there, they automatically send you a mail-in ballot. And this is pretty common. In the western states, you think Georgia's spread out. We have 159 counties. Go out west. Take a trip out there. It is wide open spaces out there. And, to get to a polling place, it may be quite a trek. When you think it's a bit of a trek to get to a polling place here, try going out west. And so it is a way to actually get more people to vote that they've been doing for quite some time out there. And it works. And, for all of these alleged voter irregularities, voter fraud, all this BS they keep coming up with. Okay, if you live out on a ranch in the middle of nowhere, who's going to be stealing your ballot? I mean, it doesn't, you're one person living on 300 acres. Does it really make sense for somebody to go to your mailbox and steal your ballot? And if you did, it just doesn't even make any sense. What they're trying to portray is this so-called, voter fraud. And it backfired on them. Here in Georgia, the Trump was trying to say, well, don't use that mail-in vote. It's ridden with voter fraud and everything, but yet he, of course, votes by mail in Florida, by the way. And now they're going to make they didn't remove the no excuse voting, but now they're going to make it a little more difficult. Apparently, you have to make a copy of your photo ID here in Georgia to actually get a mail-in ballot this next time around.
Yeah, so the Georgia law it's not a response to voter fraud. It's a response to voter turnout. So we'll just go ahead and make that very clear. The Republicans realized that they're losing, and they don't want to change their tactics. They don't want to change their views or what they're doing. They don't want to do the work. So they're going to cheat the system. And that's exactly what this whole Georgia bill is about. I read the entire Georgia bill, by the way, the SB 202. It will make you want to puke. And I typed up like a whole list of like the main points. I've got like 50 main points, and it's just like the main highlights, and it's not even like really digging down into it. But I mean, it's absurd. But all these other states are trying to copy it. Like, we were talking about other states doing this. You're absolutely right. The Western states have a track record of success doing this. And they're trying to say, well, voter fraud. Texas, for example, they had in 2020 less than 20 cases of voter fraud that were reported. Less than 20. And they're trying to pass the same kind of sweeping voter suppression laws. And they've, on a same kind of note, though, they had like 4,000 deaths by guns in 2020, but that they're not doing anything about. So, Florida is doing the same thing. They didn't have hardly any cases of voter fraud, but they're trying to do these same kind of laws. So it's a response to voter turnout. in 2020 because Trump lost. And so you're seeing this across all primarily red states. They want to bring it back to where Republicans can win. So Georgia passed this law, and we've got because we're still basically led by Republicans. We need to flip Georgia blue the rest of the way. We need to get more Democrats in charge, and I think the start, just to stop all of this, we need to pass the For the People Act, put federal prohibitions in place that will stop this sweeping voter suppression all the way around. That will put kind of some barriers in place, if you will, that will give voter rights across the board. Voter suppression is the only way Republicans think they can win. Voter rights are what's best for everyone, regardless if you're Republican or Democrat. It doesn't matter what party you lean towards. It's about what's best for America and Americans. And so we need a sweeping bill, and the For the People Act is the way to do that. So we just have to get it passed. And everyone should be calling their congressmen, their local leaders, everyone. Get on the phone, call everyone you know, and make yourself a pest to them so they can call the people they know and get this done. Bottom line.
Yeah. And if you're able to, and some strategies for this, I've done this. Record the call. If you go to the office, get your phone out and record the interaction. I did some phone calls this week down to the State House. The same stuff that Barry Loudermilk is tweeting is basically cut and paste from what the Georgia state Republicans were trying to say. They're trying to say that Colorado has more strict access to the polls than Georgia has, which, as we just discussed, doesn't make sense. But I actually called around to the several of the Georgia state senators. Two of the phone lines just went straight to a mechanical voicemail. And then the third one, I went to, the staffer answered. And of course, these staffers, when you call them, they don't have the wherewithal to interact with you. They are just there to take a phone call and pass along, in air quotes, your opinion. But record these interactions. There's a strategy on a Republican congressman up in New York State. There was an Indivisible group up there, and I have to go back and find the exact name. But there was, I think it was every Friday, that Indivisible group went to that Republican congressman's office and did a mini protest. And they had a picture of the congressman where he actually was on the roof of the building one Friday, because he was so scared to actually go on camera or interact with his constituents. No. That is the state of affairs of where we are. These people allegedly wanted to be in office so bad, but yet they're afraid of their constituents. Yeah, well, I mean, then they don't need to be in office anymore. The people should not be afraid of the government. The government should be afraid of their people. The people have, it's about the people. It's about the power of the people. And if you're in office, you need to represent your people, your constituents, and highlight and raise their voices. That is your job. So if, like Barry Loudermilk, he should be highlighting and raising the voices of the people of CD11. He only raises his own voice in Trump's. And the people of the GOP. He needs to be talking to the people of CD11. Raise those voices. So, like that person in New York, he shouldn't be on the roof. He should be in that office hearing what they have to say and then raising those voices. That's his job. That's what you're there for.
Otherwise, you don't need to be in office. The job's not for you.
Yeah. But he'll take an interview from Newsmax.
Yes, he will take an interview from Newsmax. I'm not. I have my undergrad is in mass communications, and I question whether or not Newsmax is really a newsworthy source. But that's my personal opinion. So, and again, I think he likes seeing himself on camera. But if you watch that interview, nothing there was true. And then he went on about COVID and infrastructure, and let's be clear, he voted against the American Rescue Plan. He has already made it very clear that he is not going to vote for the infrastructure bill. So you really shouldn't be talking about something that you had nothing to do with. So you can't take credit for something you wouldn't support, bottom line. Yeah. And the voting thing, well, he really didn't have any hand in that. He might have had something to do with it. At this point, I wouldn't put it past him to help Georgia, silence the voices. So, yeah, that whole interview was just a sham. It was not good.
Well, he's got to have his talking points, and when we talk about infrastructure, I mean, thankfully, who would have known all of Trump's disasters that he had on his 4 years in office, that America would be leading in vaccines? Canada right now, they're only giving vaccines, I think, to senior citizens at this point. So bravo to, Biden and, everybody that is working to get all these vaccines. But on the way to get the vaccine last evening, I got a flat tire. And so I can't fully blame, the infrastructure, but there's a lot of construction on the roads. And, they took the tire off and there was a big gash in the middle. So I can't help but wonder if, and blame, the bad roads that we have around. But that's beside the point. But, kind of veering away, I wanted a couple other points on the voting rights that I wanted to talk about. When the insurrection happened, and this also came, very focused here in Georgia, a lot of corporations stopped contributing to these elected officials that were actually towing the Republican line of that whole, air quotes, stop the steal and everything that went down in January. And there are still, FBI pictures floating around looking for, do you know this person that was in the Capitol building? I mean, that still happened. It was not some kind of Hollywood movie that went down in January. Trump was at the White House, and he claimed he was going to march to the Capitol. I mean, that we're reminded still here in April, that happened in January. And they tried a coup. And people like Barry Loudermilk stood by that. And, before we started recording today, I was wondering, and I'm looking at FEC.gov, it does not look like we have new information beyond December 2020. But we can still look at, the campaign contributions went to Barry Loudermilk in December 2020. You have companies in here, Liberty Mutual, Insurance, Delta Airlines, Goldman Sachs, the Amazon. These are companies that gave sizable amounts to Barry Loudermilk. Wells Fargo is in here. Deloitte, Anheuser-Busch, and these are in the thousands of dollars. And yet you have, someone like Barry Loudermilk that is towing this Republican line of, well, we don't know if this was actually a legitimate election, and so on and so forth. And yet
he
you
also
have
voted not to certify the election.
Yeah. And yet here on April 7th, a couple of days ago, you have this appetite for corporations to get back into this again, with JetBlue Airways giving $1,000 to a New York Republican who was on the same line again. Do they just have amnesia? Have they carved out this niche issue that they think that this Nicole Malliotakis, I may be pronouncing that wrong, this New York, representative, they've carved out this niche issue. They think that they can get some sort of sweet deal to do something here, and just ignore everything else that this, representative's been doing.
I've been thinking about this because I did see the JetBlue story yesterday, and the only thing I can even begin to think of is that I think they think people's minds or their attention is focused elsewhere right now because of everything going on. Even though January 6th was literally just like 3 months ago, which with COVID time that might seem like a year ago, but we have the Derek Chauvin trial going on right now, which is captivating really the entire world. We've got COVID just still taking up so much of our collective, everything. And I think with everything going on, you've got the NRA going through bankruptcy that's getting bigger and bigger every day. You've got so much focus on what Biden is doing. You've got focus on Matt Gaetz. So I think maybe they thought they could slip it in under the radar and nobody would notice. But I think people need to take stories like this and blast it into the atmosphere, because we don't need to forget January 6th. It was a domestic terrorist attack and insurrection on our country by one of our own, by someone leading our country. And we can't ever forget that or ever let it happen again. It is a horrible stain on our country that will never be forgotten. And it is absolutely devastating and heartbreaking to even think about. And in all honesty, we watched it happen. We watched the lead up to it happening. We knew it was going to happen, and I think people thought it was not going to happen. Nobody wanted to really take it seriously because it was Donald Trump. But we have a serious problem with extremism in the world, but in this country, and people sit by and don't want to acknowledge it until something happens like this. And now they want to go backwards and say, well, we need to do something. Well, it's a little late now. So I think anytime we start seeing these corporations start giving these donations again, they need to be held accountable. We've got all these people saying boycott Georgia because of this voter suppression bill. Well, it's not Georgia's fault. It's not. Don't blame the people of Georgia because we didn't do this. You're punishing people who have jobs and stuff, but you can absolutely hold the companies accountable that are supporting people who supported an insurrection against this country. And I think we should absolutely do that.
Yeah, and I recorded just a solo podcast this week, and I'm going to say it again. If you look at the demographics of a typical baseball game and the fans, you're going to typically see a white demographic. It's similar with NASCAR.
Mm-hmm.
If you compare that to a basketball game, like an NBA game, or you compare that to a football game, or even to a pro soccer game, you see very different demographics, right? At an NBA game, you're not going to see nearly as many white people. You're not going to see you're going to see a few more probably white people at an NFL game. I don't know that we would quite see the same reaction if this were not a baseball game. And you don't have to necessarily answer that, but I'm just going to put it on the table. Because there seems to be a lot of rigmarole about one single baseball game that actually doesn't count for anything. It's just a bunch of pro baseball players that make millions and millions of dollars a year. They're really good at their game, and they have a baseball game against each other that doesn't count for anything.
Yeah, and if you pay attention to it, they really aren't playing. Like, I went to the NHL All-Star game when it was here in Atlanta, and I was a little disappointed because they're just kind of goofing off and not really playing real hard or anything, because nobody wants to get injured. Nobody wants to hit each other, which in an NHL, that's half the fun, because you want to be good to go for the next game or the next season. So you're not playing your heart with your heart, and you're just kind of there going through the motions type thing. So the NHL All-Star game, or the same with like any All-Star game for any major league sport, is going to be more about you've got all your major stars in one place. So maybe it's just me, I don't really get the highlight of it, but and I'm not a baseball fan, so maybe it's just not that big of a deal to me. But I also don't think it was necessarily a good idea anyway, because we're still in COVID. But it is what it is. But there's I get the logic behind it. I get the Major League Baseball taking a stand in support of voting rights. I do understand that, and I support that piece of it. However, there's also the people of Georgia who, would have been working that game and were depending on that money and things of that nature. However, there's also, it would have been at Truist Park, and Truist, which was formerly SunTrust, gave a lot of money to this voter suppression effort. So there's both sides of the coin. So it's hard to know where to land on that, because obviously the voters are the most important people, and they should come first.
Yeah, and honestly, the Republicans, that they have not, gone over the line in the sand, but honestly, they lost here.
Oh yeah,
and,
absolutely.
And just like Trump, he never admits defeat. Barry Loudermilk never admits defeat, but they clearly lost with this. The game's already gone. Mm-hmm. They've taken the signs down at Truist Park, and it's gone to Colorado. They lost.
Yeah, the Braves are covering up the patch on their jerseys. I noticed that.
Yeah. So, and you have the corporations that also, with all their money that they were contributing to these lawmakers on both sides, and even Mitch McConnell trying to have it both ways. He got behind Citizens United for all that money going to all of the lawmakers, and now they want to get on the other side and say, well, no, corporations need to get out of politics. Or these other arguments all of a sudden that, oh, no, we need to get politics out of sports. You can't have it both ways.
Well, it's funny because it was several years ago, I don't remember exactly when, Mitch McConnell is the one who took the FEC to court, I think almost the Supreme Court, and McConnell v. FEC, so he could keep corporations in politics.
Mm-hmm.
So, which way you want it, McConnell, you literally can't have it both ways. So I think a lot of people forget about that, but it was Mitch McConnell v. the Federal Elections Commission, and it was purely about keeping corporate money in politics. And so I thought that was funny that now he's the one saying corporations should stay out of it. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah.
All right. So moving on, the other topics we were going to cover here, healthcare. So this is hitting home this year. My mom is wanting to retire, for example, but she's not old enough for Medicare yet. And so we went to her birthday was last month, and we went to lunch, and she just kind of threw her hands up. And she goes, well, I just don't understand any of this. You're going to have to help me out. And I went out to healthcare.gov, as the good son, and printed out, this is how much it potentially is going to cost and everything. And she says, oh, well, this may be manageable. I said, well, imagine that, Mom. But it's honestly, it's still expensive. I talked to a friend a week or two ago. He lives in Mississippi, and he pays around $800 a month for health insurance. That's expensive. The only other expense I think we have would be housing. That's more than that.
I pay $500 a month for just me. So I understand completely. It's ridiculous. So it's not good. We definitely need some healthcare reform in this country. And I might be able to help you a little bit more with your mom offline. So depending on her age and everything, she might actually be eligible for Medicare. So I'm actually going through that same kind of process with my mother. So I understand. But the price of health care is just ridiculous. And now you've got you've got employers that don't have to offer health care. They can just opt out, which that's the situation I'm in. And so I have to get my own, and it's $500 a month just for me. And I have decent coverage, but it's not the best. But I'm very thankful to have coverage. Don't get me wrong. So we just need. I do believe we need Medicare for all, but it will take us time to get there. If we tried to start it, even in January, it would not work. Medicare, as it works right now, the reason it keeps getting to the point where it's almost, bankrupt is because of how the spending works. And I've worked in healthcare for 20 years now. I've seen the way Medicare pays out. It is absolutely ridiculous. Some place, depending on what field it is and things like that, the diagnoses and all, there's a whole lot to it. It pays really, really well for some things, and it doesn't pay squat to other. It's ridiculous. So Medicare needs to be just completely overhauled. That's the first piece of it. The other piece of it is, I think Biden's plan for a public and private payer option is the first piece to transition to Medicare for all. It's a start. It will put some necessary infrastructure pieces in place while you build towards a Medicare for all plan. But when I say there's a lot that needs to be done, I mean there's a lot. It's things that people don't even think about that go into this, like you need medical personnel. And with the medical personnel means, it goes along with medical school. And you need medical schools to be more cost effective, and that means student loan and then student loan reform. And then so you get into the medical licensure, which is just absurd, and the malpractice insurance, which is just a joke. So there's a lot of pieces involved in this. And then you get into access to care, which if we go to some of these rural areas, there's nothing. And when I say nothing, I mean nothing. They've shut down everything. And then you get into, I could go on about mental health care forever because that is my passion project. I was in mental health care for a very long time. They shut down all the state hospitals, so people with severe mental illness have nowhere to go. And their families are taking care of them, and they don't know how. And we need to open those state hospitals back up, and we need to have the funding there and the qualified health personnel there to take care of them. And so there's a lot there. So I think we can do Medicare for all. I think it's absolutely possible. It just can't. It won't happen overnight. It won't happen in the next 6 months. it's going to take time to get there, but we can absolutely get there. We just need the people, the expertise, the funding, and infrastructure there to do it. And we can absolutely become a country that has amazing health care for everyone, that is quality health care and accessible health care. And it can be, oh my God, it can be amazing. You just need the right people in place to do it.
Yeah. I mean, look at Canada. I mean, you know, and even I have an uncle that is quite you know, a conservative Republican, and I've said it numerous times, and he echoes it. He says he loves Medicare. Mm-hmm. Nobody complains about Medicare. And how long have we had Medicare? Now you just mentioned about the payout side, but all the beneficiaries of Medicare, nobody complains about it.
Well,
Even my go ahead. I mean the beneficiary. I mean, my mom, you know, she's too young for it, and she wishes she had it. I mean, and we're looking at this. You know, everybody's wanting, you know, Medicare for all, but you know, and mostly nobody really complains about Medicare, but yet all of the for-profit healthcare, you know, regime here in America is fighting tooth and nail to prevent it.
Mm-hmm. There are some coverage gaps with Medicare. The biggest thing is what's called the donut hole, which is really detrimental to a lot of seniors in this country because they're on a fixed income. So with Medicare, you have it's a coverage gap, and most of us in healthcare call it the donut hole, because you pay so much out, and then Medicare will pay so much out, and then you hit this coverage gap, and you have to pay. It's like $2,000, I think, out of pocket before Medicare will start paying again. And it usually ends up hitting at your prescriptions. And that's you can't do that. I mean, seniors especially need their medications. And that's not somewhere you can hit them and expect them to pay out of pocket, especially when you're on a fixed income. And you can't deprive them of their medications. You can't. This is not an area you can just, in my opinion, play around with, because you're messing with people's literal lives. So when I used to run medical practices and stuff, you know, we used to run into this problem a lot, and we'd have to find creative solutions for it, because we can't have a patient just not be able to get their meds because they can't afford them. And you know, it's a very big problem. And a lot of times, if they have a secondary policy to pick up for Medicare, the secondary policy doesn't cover the donut hole, which, I'm sorry, what's the point of a secondary that picks up if you don't cover the donut hole? Like, so these are the things in healthcare that are just absolutely absurd, that need reform and need fixing. It's just these, like, absurd things that, in my opinion, take advantage of our underserved population and our fixed income population and our elderly, and that we can do better on. Like, I mean, we shouldn't even have to have these conversations. Like, that's just something that should be in place. Like, we should be absolutely taking care of our elderly like they're the most precious commodity in this entire world, in my opinion. And we should be just, I have a soft spot for the elderly. I think they're amazing, and I love them, and I put them on a pedestal, and I think we should just cradle them and love them. And I just think it's atrocious the way they're taken advantage of sometimes by these health insurance companies.
Yeah, for sure. And even it seemed to have died down, but I remember a year or two ago the AJC did there was a expose or some, for lack of a better term, where they went into some of these senior care homes. You have nursing homes, but you also have the in the middle, assisted living care. And I drove by one the other day that's brand new. They're popping up all here around the metro area. And it's not the same level of care that you have in a nursing home. But as you know, our older generation, they have good days, they have bad days, and there are some days that they need more help than they need others. And there were some stories that were covered, unfortunately, where there were some gaps in that assisted living arrangement that I don't know they actually ever covered or filled. I don't know if you heard of that or remember any of those stories.
So I've worked in a nursing home, and I understand why they're there. They're essential to a point, but it's not an ideal situation for anybody. That is one of the places I will say that Medicare pays out an absorbent amount of money for patients that are on Medicare. And I will say some, not all, some nursing homes absolutely take advantage of the system. I have personally seen it myself way too many times, and it is awful. I mean, they can get upwards of $12,000 a day per patient that's on Medicare. So they want all the Medicare patients they can get. But, again, Medicare, they'll pay for like 90 days, and then that's all they pay for. And then you turn into what's called a long-term care patient. So you have to switch over to like Medicaid or self-pay. And then once you have like 60 days of wellness, if you go back into the hospital for 3 nights and then go back to a facility, they will pay for another 90 days. And so if you ever see this trend with a loved one that's in a nursing home, that's why they ended up back in the hospital for things like UTIs and dehydration. It is a very messed up scheme that, again, Medicare. But then you have like mental health providers that are taking a hit for something called sequestration, and it's only being impacted, it's only affecting mental health providers. So psychiatrists are getting a percentage taken off of each of their payments for each Medicare patient, and they already don't get paid squat for Medicare, but each time they see one, they get an additional percentage taken off that is just a write-off for them. They can't charge the patient or anything. But it's something that Medicare passed called sequestration. And they might get $50 or $60 per visit for a Medicare patient, and then they take an additional few dollars off for this thing called sequestration. Medicare keeps that as a way to kind of recoup costs. Yet they're paying anywhere between $3,000 and $12,000 a day for nursing home patients. So it's really messed up. And there you go. But assisted livings are kind of like an independent living. You're supposed to be able to live independently there. It's just kind of like your new home, but there's some staff there to give you your medications and stuff. If you need more care while you're there, you can get home health to come in and assist and stuff like that. Some assisted livings will have like a dementia unit for those who have memory impairments. That will be a locked unit, and that will have additional care. It does cost additional money. Those are all private pay, though. Those are very expensive. But personal care homes is where they're having a lot of problems, and a lot of them are unlicensed, and what happens there is very scary. Some of them are licensed and very good, though. Just depends. Just if you're putting your family member in a personal care home, please make sure they're licensed and that the care they're getting there, just check in often and make sure they're getting very good care. It all depends on the level of care it's needed.
Yeah, some of the pillows that I've seen on some elderly couches. Be kind to your children. They pick your nursing home.
Yes, that's exactly. They do. And, I mean, there's always extra services that can be brought in, like if you do choose an assisted living. Like there's home health, there's hospice, there's senior assistant living, senior helpers, things like that can help you out. So that's all good. And like there's always resources out there. And if anybody needs to know, I know way too much about this stuff, as you can clearly tell. And I'm always able to answer questions or help out in any way I can. So people can always just send me a message, and I will help out in any way I can, because this is, as I said, the elderly and the seniors are like my loves, and I will do anything I can to help them.
Yeah, for sure. That's why we did this episode today, too, to kind of dig deeper. Any other healthcare stories or particular demographics or anything you can think of?
My other like real passion is probably women's healthcare and access for like LGBTQ. Is, you know, there's a lot I think that people don't think of when it comes to women's reproductive health care. Whenever people think about like women's health care, they automatically just go right to whether or not to continue a pregnancy. And there is just so much more involved than that. And again, I can go off. There's a whole lot. I've been in healthcare far too long, so I could go on and on about this all day, but I won't. So, like, you could, I think we need more access and more quality care for women and, in general, for LGBTQ clients. Like, we need just specialized care that just addresses them as a whole, so we can all get the proper care that we need, without it being like a controversial subject, because it shouldn't even be a talking point, in my opinion. It should just be like, I mean, no offense to you, but we don't talk about men's reproductive care, men's reproductive health as a talking point. It's just regular care for you. So it should be the same for me and everybody else. You know, we have like basic gynecological care, contraceptive care, prenatal care, maternal care, postpartum care, cancer screenings. Women these days are you're seeing women diagnosed with different forms of reproductive cancer, younger and younger. And it's being caught too late, to where it's having a detrimental effect because they're not having access to the screenings they need, which is horrible. A lot of insurances won't even pay for a mammogram until you're 40, and unless you have a family history of breast cancer. And I'm sorry, that's just terrifying. No. And then you know, we need access to, insurance needs to start thinking about regular coverage for, fertility treatments and egg storage and stem cell banking and family planning, surrogacy and adoption services. And I think the same goes for LGBTQ. Infectious disease screening regularly, counseling and therapy services, fertility planning and storage, family planning, routine health screenings. These are all things that, again, should not be a talking point. They should just be regular forms of care that you have regular access to. Don't have to worry about it being covered or not. You just look up a provider. It should be a provider nearby, again, regular access, and you go get the care and treatment you need, bottom line. This is, again, one of my, passion projects.
Well, it's common sense. And it's,
yes.
what any doctor would do, but it's when for-profit healthcare gets in the middle of it, and you got all these pre-authorizations, and the doctor wants to do this, but it's like, well, no, we got to call the insurance company and see if this pre-authorization is going to go through. It's when for-profit healthcare gets in the middle that then we've got all this other stuff going on, and yeah. Yeah, sometimes it's the simplest things can't get done because of the dumbest rules, and
or just antiquated thinking, and it's not okay, and we need to start thinking that everybody is equal. It doesn't matter who you are. Equal rights for others does not mean less rights for you. And that's, if we can have everybody thinking that way and treating others with kindness and leading with kindness, I think we would be in a much better place. And, in healthcare especially, you take a Hippocratic oath, and you should be honoring that. And no one should get different treatment just because they think or live differently than you do. And like what just passed in Arkansas is atrocious. It is absurd, like not being able, you can choose not to treat someone or turn someone away because they're transgender or LGBTQ. That's against a Hippocratic oath. You can't do that. It's also against, like here in Georgia, there's a rule called EMTALA, and for emergency room, you can't do that. And I think it will be found unconstitutional when they take it to court. But it's, yeah, that's, and I see more of those bills going through in some of these red states, and I think that's horrible. Like, what kind of lesson are we teaching to the youth of America? Like, just, I don't think that's okay.
I think the Arkansas bill was vetoed by their governor, if I'm not mistaken.
The state, it was, and the state legislature pushed it through.
Imagine that.
They overhauled the veto, made it a veto-proof bill, which is so messed up.
It's the race to the bottom of the barrel.
It really is.
Which the next topic up is education.
It's like, where do you go from there?
Education. So the news story about education here in Georgia lately is that Sonny Perdue is up for a candidate to be chancellor of the university system here in Georgia.
Oh.
So let's look at Sonny Perdue. He was ag secretary under Trump, and former governor here in Georgia. My story and I have talked about this on a previous episode. Having politicians leading higher education, it typically is not the best result. Kennesaw State University is now the second largest public university in Georgia. I saw the stats. I'm an alumni via Southern Polytechnic. Republicans in Georgia decided to combine a lot of the state universities, and that was one of the mergers that they pushed through. To combine Southern Polytechnic and Kennesaw together, so that makes me a alumni by proxy. But and I was a former adjunct faculty at Kennesaw State for a short time. But the last term that I taught there was, if we look at the story there, was the time they installed Sam Olens as the president. So Sam Olens was the former Attorney General here in Georgia, and he also had a time on the in Cobb County politics. And then the cheerleader scandal, as you might remember, at Kennesaw State went down under his administration. That led to Cobb County Sheriff and Mr. Earhart pressuring him to remove the cheerleaders off the field. There were payouts to the cheerleaders over all that scandal, and then Sam Olens, I believe, lasted about a year as president of Kennesaw State before he was replaced and removed. If that's any track record on what politicians as leaders of higher education look like, I don't think that's a very good idea.
Well, and honestly, it makes me sound very jaded, but I question their motive. Well, other than him being a politician, what are his credentials to be a chancellor of the university system? I think part of our education system, I think, is broken, just like our healthcare system. My sister-in-law is a teacher. She's a kindergarten teacher in Gwinnett County. And my stepmom, she just retired from being a teacher. And I talked to them quite a bit about teaching and everything. And it's the stuff they have to go through. Good Lord, I thought working in healthcare was hard sometimes. I commend all teachers. I couldn't be a teacher. I will say that right up front. You people are saints. They really are superheroes. I think the pandemic has taught all of us that teachers deserve to be paid way more than they are. But I think anybody that's going to lead any kind of educational system should have amazing credentials and background in education. Now, if they're going to have political credentials, I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but the education credentials should far exceed those political credentials, because we need people who understand children, how they learn, and how their minds work, because that's what's wrong with the systems today, is we have this one-size-fits-all education system, and no one is like that. It doesn't work. We also need people who understand what a godsend teachers are and how magical they are, and that they are superheroes, and that we need to invest in our educators, because without them, we don't have an education system. Instead, we treat teachers like they're expendable. And again, I think this pandemic has shown us that we're clearly wrong on that level. So we need to, I think, like the healthcare system, we need to invest in our education system, invest in our educators. They shouldn't be scraping by to work. They shouldn't be worried about their paycheck. They should be worried about their students. They should be, like we have students going to school, and they have, in elementary school, they have student lunch debt. And, my sister-in-law was telling me about this, and she's a kindergarten teacher. And there's student lunch debt for kindergartners. And she talks to me about it, and I'm like, this is the stuff she's worrying about. That's not something that should be a concern. Like, what is wrong with our system? Like, this is what is happening. And then there's standardized testing. Like, my nephews just had to go through. They're in first grade. Why do we have standardized testing in first grade? I'm sorry. First grade, I was like still trying to figure out how to find the library in first grade. This is not our standardized testing. I think needs to go away. You don't need to. Your whole life shouldn't be determined on how you were doing on one day of school. It just shouldn't. We need, and then there's also a direct correlation between standardized tests and prison. And how many people go to prison? Which is mind-boggling. We need to fund the arts programs, the humanities, the social studies, because students need a creative outlet, not just in elementary school, but all through school. Because there's a direct correlation between the arts and improved scores in math, science, and writing. You can't expect students to just, crunch numbers and, be inside books all day. They need to be able to unwind and be creative. Otherwise, they're going to have meltdowns and breakdowns. They're not behavioral students. They're they're human, and they're overwhelmed. I mean, it happens to all of us. So I think these things are all important, that we need to show that we're invested in our future, and the children are the future. So we need to prove that we care enough about our children to invest in them. And I should also add that Barry Loudermilk has like a 0% rating with the National Education Association, and he's got like a ton of kids. So there you go.
Well, I think he was in some sort of committee meeting, and he boasted that all of his kids had no student debt, as that was somehow relevant to whatever the conversation was. Yes, privileged, rich, white man with all white children, of course, and how that was relevant to anything that was going on in the committee meeting. Of course, you live in your bubble. You don't meet with all of your constituents, and that's, of course, what you come up with.
Yeah. Well, I do have student debt, and that's something else we need a lot of reform on, because it is absurd the way mine is federal. It's not private, and let me tell you, I have a lot less than a lot of people out there. I have never missed a payment. I've never been late on a payment. And when President Trump came into office, or shortly after he came into office, from 1 month to the next, my monthly premium tripled. And it's almost as much as my mortgage payment now. And no one could tell me why. They just said, well, it's the new administration. Excuse me?
Yeah. Congratulations. Welcome. Yeah.
And like I said, I mean, I was flabbergasted, and I'm still working to get it lowered. And it's been like 4 years now, and I'm still trying to get it lowered. And like I said, mine is, I've got, it's like $40,000. So it's a lot less than most people have. I mean, I know I've got a friend that's got like $230,000 in debt, and I was like, I can't imagine what she's going through. I mean, mine is, it could be way worse. And I was like, and they don't, what's astonishing to me is with federal loans, is what they keep explaining to me is they do not care, and I have this actually recorded, what other bills you have at all, unless it's a federal loan or a federal payment. They do not count it. So no matter what other bills you have in your life, they do not consider it when you're doing a payment option or anything. It does not matter. The only other payments they care about are if they are federal payments. Those are the only ones they will take into account when considering a payment option for you. And I was like, what if you have a mortgage? Because, I mean, I'm single. I live alone. I mean, I have a mortgage. I have a car payment. I have medical bills. I have health insurance. And they said, well, none of that matters to us. Unless you have other federal payments, we don't care. Okay. Well, and then they did tell me, and I have this recorded too, that if I was married, that they could consider lowering my payment, because then I would have had a family and I would have dependents at that point, which I thought was the most absurd thing I'd ever heard.
Yeah, I think it has something to do with they look at your total situation and then total debt and everything, but it doesn't go away. It's the only, even in bankruptcy, it doesn't go away.
No, I mean, I just told them, I was like, y'all prey on people. You absolutely prey on people. So it was really awful. I'm still trying to get it fixed. This is 4 years later, it's still happening. So
And
And it's all just going to interest. Like, people are like, well, you borrowed money, you should pay it back. And I keep trying to have this conversation. Like, I understand that, but they make it where you can never get out from underneath the loan. Like, so, like, they prey on students where you want to get an education, but then they give you this interest and then they do these things to your loans and these payments, and then you just never get out from underneath them.
Yeah, and what did Trump do? He put Betsy DeVos over the education. Yeah. And
yeah.
Even my mom said that was the most ridiculous thing ever. I was like, well, why do you keep voting for these people? But whatever.
Yeah, one of my coworkers is actually one of the people that was impacted by Betsy DeVos and her the whole thing with the defrauded college people. The loans that were supposed to be dismissed or that were dismissed by President Obama, and then DeVos came in and brought them back in, and like they've been hassling them and stuff. Her loans were dismissed, and then when DeVos came in, you should hear the phone calls she gets. I mean, and the messages they leave, it's horrible. Like, they downright threaten her. I mean, oh my gosh, she has some of the voicemail saved. It's awful. And I told her, I said, you need to save all of those, because if you go to court or something, you need to play these, because I mean, they literally threaten her to show up at her house and take all of her stuff, and it's awful.
Yeah. There have been some young people that have just left the country just to start over in another country.
And her loan that is remaining, it's like $2,300. Like, it's not even a lot of money. It's just like, she goes, they're sitting here threatening to come take all my stuff for $2,300. And I was like, wow. Like, I hate to hear the ones that have like $50,000, what they're doing to them.
Yep. All right. Time flies. What other topics did you want to cover today by chance?
I can talk about anything. Can you tell I like to talk? I'm good. Like, what's on your mind? Hit me.
That actually covers everything that I wanted to cover. Actually, well, there was one other thing. We did tweet. It is not brand new news, but Matt Gaetz was mentioned a little bit earlier. It is somewhat timely. Barry Loudermilk campaigned with what was his name? It escaped me all of a sudden.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Hold on. Because we're trying to talk about it, neither one of us can remember the name.
The Dugars.
Yes.
So this was back in October 2014 in Woodstock on Town Lake Parkway. And I'm still amazed that this event has not been deleted off Facebook. But this is back when the Faith Family Freedom Action Tour was a thing, because it's, in air quotes, religious somehow. But the Dugars were going around helping politicians like Barry Loudermilk campaign. Just want to get your thoughts on that.
I think, honestly, I think it's disgusting. I think if you need someone like that to campaign with you, I think you've got a different kind of problem. And I tend to believe people who are kind of hyper-religious or overly talk about how religious they are, people tend to cover up, or they're covering up something. Most people who are genuinely Christian, they don't talk about it. They don't flaunt it. So I tend to get leery when people flaunt it about what they're trying to hide. That's just been my personal experience. And And that goes for Barry Loudermilk. He talks about it all the time, just like Donald Trump did. He talks about it all the time. And we've seen, kind of what kind of people they are. So if you need a figure like that to come and campaign with you, I think that speaks volumes. And not in a good way. So the fact that he hasn't deleted it is interesting. You'd think he would have. Well, maybe he doesn't care. Maybe he thinks he's safe and unbeatable, so he doesn't need to delete it. But yeah, well, he is aligning himself with Marjorie Taylor Greene as well. So I'm not entirely sure what goes on in his head. Not that I kind of want to know. Yeah, the Duggars, Matt Gaetz. I worked in mental health for, almost 15 years, and sometimes I'm really glad that I can't get inside some people's heads.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably leave it at that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the little bit that I know, and even the predecessor to it was Tom Graves that had the district up there where Marjorie Taylor Greene is. Barry Loudermilk's son. There's a story that broke where they were at a restaurant down in downtown Atlanta, and allegedly someone broke into their car they were in. And I'm not sure if you saw that story, but there were guns in the car. There was a Bible. There was, I think, cash. There was a laptop. And it basically, Tom Graves was riding around basically like a drug lord. And Barry Loudermilk's son was working with Tom Graves and happened to be there in the vehicle with him. That was a story that kind of flew under the radar years ago. And then Tom Graves decided not to rerun, and then, Marjorie Taylor Greene jumps over our district to go and win that district over there. But you have a better chance of winning than Marjorie Taylor Greene's folks do. 60% of the vote is all that Barry Loudermilk was able to squeeze out this last time.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Marjorie Taylor Greene got 75%. Yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene got 75%. So.
And she was unopposed, technically.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she's got a couple of competitors this time, but it's a hard district to turn blue. But yeah, Barry needs. It's time for him to retire, and I think I'm the person to send him packing. I think we need a woman in that district to lead the way. And I don't own any guns, so you won't find any in my car. Just to put that out there, I don't have any. I don't know if that makes a difference or not, but I promise you won't find one in my car. If you do, it's not mine.
All right. Well, any parting words? I'll wrap this one up for today.
Well, thanks for having me on. If anybody has any questions or concerns, please feel free to email me. My email is heather@heatherforgeorgia.com, or you can visit my website, heatherforgeorgia.com, to learn more about me. Or if you want to donate, that would be fantastic, because we're going to need a lot of money to beat Barry Loudermilk. And I really appreciate it. And please give me a call if you want to have me on again. This was really fun. I like talking to you. You're very easy to talk to. And message me about your mom. I might be able to help out a little bit.
Yeah, let me see where she is. She kind of changes her mind every month or so, but let me see where she is, and we'll go from there.
Oh, God, she sounds just like my mom. All right, well, you be safe, and thank you for getting vaccinated, and we'll talk soon.
Yep, have a good weekend.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.